Hi, and welcome back to the number one podcast in the sport where, unfortunately, bad things can happen to good people. And I say that because the first thing I've got to say is rest in peace to Sharif Dean Lawal, or generally known just as Sheriff, ex-St. Pancras amateur boxer, who sadly passed away on Sunday while making his debut. And I'm finding it really hard to say because I'm just processing where his head would have been at 24 hours ago. And I'm just processing where his friends and family's head would have been at, and how you go from that kind of emotional peak, both individually and collectively, to where we are. Not just me, but his family and his friends, and the people he trained, and the people he fought against, and the people he was cool with. And we're all there trying to process. How do you go from that to knowing he'll never get to fight number 2, and in fact fight number 1 will never count? Yes, it's heartbreaking. And so people will say, look, he wasn't one of your fighters, he wasn't this, he wasn't that. Why does it hurt? Here's the reason why it hurts. Every session, every week, I have to convince people that they can chase their dreams. And I have to convince parents to send their kids into not just my care, but the care of other coaches and the care of other clubs. And we do this with the promise that we will keep your children safe. We do this by saying we will keep the sport safe. That's what we do. And we genuinely believe the sport is safe because we do everything we can. You know, I've come from rugby and I've come from other sports, and I lost a very good friend of mine, rest in peace, Jason Lehman. And Jace died from a heart attack on a rugby pitch. Ambulance took like 40 minutes to arrive. There was no defib. And he passed away on a rugby pitch, and he left 3 children who have all grown into fantastic adults, great families, everything, and I'm so proud of them. And when that happened, and it happened on my mum's 60th birthday, and I remember this because I was there, and I'd gone to see the boys before the game, and then I obviously had to go and do stuff for my mum's birthday. And told me that Jason had a heart attack. And in my head, I was like, had it been boxing, there'd have been a doctor there. There would have been a defib right there. There would have been an ambulance, paramedics. He would have been handled within 30 seconds tops. And I've always held that up to be why boxing is not perfect, but why boxing is great. And we've had to learn that. You know, the Michael Watson disasters and everything that's happened before that and after that have taught us it's an ever-evolving process. So knowing what I know about how hard we try to make the sport safe, to know that on his debut, and I'm not revealing any secrets to say your debut should generally be your easiest fight. Everyone wants you to win. For this to happen on your debut, it's heartbreaking, and it's not about who's accountable, who's responsible right now. Right now, it's just, this is heartbreaking because this is a sport we all love. And when we lose one of our warriors, it's heartbreaking because you're taking another grain of sand off the beach that is the sport we love. And I'm in a fog because that's not a guy, and no disrespect if you live in Scotland, that's not a guy that lived in Glasgow or lived in Dunfermline or anything like that. That's Sharif's a guy I know to say hello to. I know to say, look, what's happening with your career? You're staying amateur, you're going pro. I know he did the nationals last year or the year before. So, I mean, you see each other and you say, yeah, what's going on? Like, one of his former club mates did really well in the ABAs this year, got to the final. So, he was part of that St. Pancras revival. I don't want to say revival because it's a bit disrespectful, but, it's a club of guys like Peter Hamer. So they've always been there or thereabouts, but this has been that time where it's more visible. And he was a big part of that. And I think he might have been club captain. So this is someone we know personally. Strong, in shape, boxed well at 75 and all of this. And so for him to be gone, it leaves you a little bit numb, a little bit like, why do we do this? And we're meant to be rolling into one of the biggest weeks we've had in boxing for about 20 years. And all I can think of is, why? But I don't want to make this too much about that, because I think over time things will come out and the story may move on. But what I do want to say is, to all of his family, my prayers are with you. To all of his friends, my prayers are with you. To all of those who had a relationship with him, maybe work colleagues, whatever, my thoughts and prayers are with you, all of you, because imagine how you felt yesterday and how you feel today. I can't process that. All I can say is rest in peace, Sharif Din Lawal, and boxing will never forget you. May God bless you. So as hard as it is, the podcast has to go on, and we do have to talk about stuff that happened in boxing. And number one, that confusing scenario on Saturday night where we had a Lauren Price card and a Denzel Bentley card running at the same time, and none of it appeared to make any sense. And I don't even know how the board allowed this to happen, because surely the board is saying this isn't good for the sport. One of those cards could have been on a Friday, and it would have affected ticket sales. It would have affected the audience. In fact, it would have helped your audience. If we'd gone Friday night boxing into Saturday night boxing, I think most fans would have been happy. I think there's this mistaken idea that people will only buy tickets on a Saturday. If you're doing a York Hall show, Friday or Saturday seem to do relatively similar numbers anyway. So I don't know why they didn't do that. But I want to touch on Denzel Bentley. And Denzel fought Danny Dignum. And I think I said at the time, or I said in one of my Q&As, if you're not following me on Instagram, you don't get the Q&As. Like, I'm trying to keep them separate because, I think the people who are on Instagram should get something different, something a little bit different than the podcast. It's how you add flavor. And, people should be happy that I made that subscription only. Start charging people for those answers. Do you ever used to be a thing called Cash for Questions, where you pay Tory MPs some money and they'd ask questions on your behalf? But, supposedly that was then. But if you missed the Q&A, I talked about Bentley versus Dignum, and I said it should be an easy win for Denzel. And it wasn't to disrespect Danny Dignum. I quite like Danny Dignum. I think if Danny Dignum had never wanted to turn pro and wanted to be an amateur his whole career, he'd have probably gone to the Olympics in 2020. He'd probably be in the running now. He will always be a guy, like Audley Harrison, a guy who is just perfectly suited for the amateurs. Yeah, his boxing senses, the way he's built, is all perfect for the amateurs. The pros are a different game. And I said in my Q&A, Danny Dignum's problem is he's a super talented boxer betrayed by a really fragile body. Just like his brother. If you look at them, they're really narrow. And not only are they narrow, but they're long. They've got long necks. So that gap from ear to collarbone is long. And the thing with that is it's a sign of high estrogen levels. It's why, if you notice, people find women with long necks attractive. If you go and look, like the women they class as glamorous, go and look at the gap between ear and collarbone. And then look at the women they say are unattractive and women that look like pigs. And go measure the gap between ear and collarbone, and you'll see the massive difference. We're just programmed to identify high estrogenicity in organisms because the body gives clues. Now, why is this important? This is very important because when you're training day in, day out, what you don't want is excessive amounts of a compound that make your tendons weaker, make your ligaments weaker, kind of not reduce your bone density, but mean you don't pack on the bone density that you might have done in other contexts. You don't hold the muscle the same way you do, so you don't even get the same benefits out of training that you would with a lower estrogen count. And we're not talking about like a 20% swing. No, we're talking about those marginal differences that when you multiply them over 365 days a year and 8 or 9 years of a career, they become noticeable. And so Danny never had the physical gifts to match his talent. I mean, I don't say this to disrespect him. I think, like I said, I think he's a top boxer. Denzel's different. Like, Denzel is physically built to fight. Denzel is physically built to punch heavily. He has long arms, but he is strong and he's explosive. And as much as it may not look it, he's quick. He's set up to fight. Look, I don't think you'll ever see Denzel out on his back. He's a tough Ghanaian man. And they generally build him tough in Ghana. And so when they went into this fight, and it was tough for me because I wouldn't talk about it, because obviously on one side, I'm cool with Denzel, we're friends, got a lot of love for Denzel, have done from day one. And then my friend Eddie Lamb's training Danny Dignum. So I can't really speak about the fight because it's like, well, it's a bit awkward. But I'd always had this thing, even before the fight was announced, I remember saying to Ed, you got to be careful how you train Danny. Like, you can't train him like you train Sam Noakes. Sam Noakes is built to handle high training volumes. Danny Dignum's not. That's how he gets injured. But if you can't do the volume of training, it's very hard to then do the fight. So it's very hard to have a career. And so come Saturday night, main event, I messaged him, mate. I said, as soon as Denzel hits him clean, this fight's over. Danny won't recover from it. I can guarantee it. He won't recover. He's not built that way. And as soon as Denzel landed that straight right to the body, and people keep saying he got hit in the solar plexus. Maybe he did. But what Denzel did is he threw what I call the out to in backhand, right? There are any number of ways you can throw a backhand. But he threw that out to in backhand, which you should do as a southpaw because then you're arrowing in on the liver. Now, people say it's the solar plexus, but if you look at how big the liver is as an organ, anything under that kind of right rib cage side is probably liver. At the bottom end of it, it's probably liver. So I imagine what he did is he threw that left hand and Danny just felt that in the liver and got, ooh, God, that's horrible. And then got caught again in the liver. And then that final knockdown, and God bless Danny's corner because they're like, we need to stop this. Everyone knew, like, this fight's over. Because it was the first exchange that happened in anger. And you're like, okay, no. These are two completely different athletes in there. And yes, people talk about they've done previous rounds of sparring, but I'll tell you this for now. Say this with absolute certainty. Yeah. What you do in 16-ounce gloves against someone you're relatively okay with is completely different to when you need redemption and you got 10-ounce gloves on with those massive hand wraps that you have. Completely different. Like, people won't understand until you get hit with 10-ounce gloves how different it is. Like, you can get hit with 16-ounce gloves, and normally, like, sparring gloves are there to protect knuckles and so forth, right? So there's a bit more charity in those knuckles. Fight gloves don't have that. The weight is everywhere apart from the knuckles. So it's quite soul destroying, actually, being hit with that repeatedly. And there's a certain toughness you need, a certain physical resilience you need. And that's why you've got to respect those boxers that don't get injured. That show up fight after fight, camp after camp. Guys like Anthony Joshua, just fighting 3, 4, 5 times a year, elbows strapped up, hands strapped up, shoulders strapped up, and they keep going. And you know what they're putting their body through. And the fact that their body can survive all of that is a miracle. But I was happy for Denzel. And if you guys go back to the Nathan Heaney episode, and I alluded to the fact that I understood why the fight went the way it did. You know, now that Denzel's been open about it, you know, in the build up to this fight and in the post-fight interview, and he's talked about the troubles he had, you know, as he emerged into family life. And I felt for him, you know, and it's tough. You know, as an older head, it's tough because I knew it was happening, and I sent a little message just saying, yo, man, stay strong. But I can't interfere too much because part of being a man is going through trials and tribulations, you know, and he had his people around him, which was good. But there's certain things you just got to go through alone. And so it was tough for me. It was tough. It was hard for me to then watch the fight with Heaney. It was hard to watch that fight knowing that if they rematched, it would be a relatively easy fight for Denzel. It would. If Brad Pauls did that to Nathan Heaney, what does Denzel do? And that's not downplaying Brad, but Brad's not a two-time British champion. Right? And don't forget, Denzel beat Linus, who, if you ask most people believe Linus beats Brad in the fight. But I don't like triangulating that way. Let's park that, actually. I shouldn't have said that. The point is, if Denzel rematches Nathan, I think the result gets reversed. And we need to give him credit, because we've seen people cancel fights for far weaker reasons than your child being in intensive care and your partner being in intensive care and you having to make those trips because that is your job as the man of the family. Your job is to provide that umbrella of stability and protection that leaves everybody else safe to be vulnerable. And he had to do that while he was fighting. I respect that a lot. And that's what a professional is. Yeah. And remember, he never made an excuse. Took his lumps. Just took his lumps. And now he's back. And you say, so where do you want to see Denzel next? Does he just go to avenge all of his losses? Maybe Denzel fights the winner of Tyler Denny and Felix Cash. If it's Tyler Denny, which it could be, that'll be a good fight. If it's Felix, then redemption. Just make sure you get the testing in place. Does he fight the winner of the middleweight 5v5? Why not? I think he's competitive in all of those fights. And he's the sort of guy, now that Denzel doesn't have an O to protect, I don't think he cares who he fights. He just wants to get stuck in hard fights, big fights, fights that make him a London boxing legend, a British boxing legend. And I think he can do that. So I'm really, really, really happy for him. I'm glad that he's back in the win column. But it wouldn't be fair not to talk about Danny Dignum. I don't think Danny will box again. Danny was ABA champion the year after his brother was. I think it was the same weight class as well, because they're twins. And so John will be talking to him going, mate, go and do something else. And I don't think that will be a bad thing. I think Danny's been a great servant to British boxing. He's been a great servant to London boxing. Wasn't afraid to go and take on Janibek. Never been afraid to take on a fight. Just a lot of respect. But I'll always put him in that Jake Ball category of guys who are super talented in the amateurs, because the amateurs is a bit more forgiving. And then the pros just expose nothing other than physical frailties. So whatever Danny goes on to do in his career, I wish him all the best. I think he's been a class act. He's a good person. Just unlucky, man. Like boxing, much like bodybuilding, much like rugby, much like most other sports, boxing is about what you were blessed with when you were born. And I didn't really understand this until someone said to me, and they were talking about Ronnie Coleman, and they said Ronnie Coleman could have trained any style, high intensity, high volume, low volume. He could have done sets of 3, he could have done sets of 1, and Ronnie Coleman would have still looked impressive, because it doesn't matter about drugs, and it doesn't matter about the training, and it doesn't matter about this. If you're genetically gifted in that you respond the right way to the right things, you're unbeatable. You know, him, Jay Cutler, Phil Heath, they all look different, right, in terms of how their physiques are put together. But what united them was those bodies were designed to grow. You guys have to forgive me if I don't go into detail about most of the fights on that card, because it was a pretty transactional card, apart from, you know, the need to revive Denzel's career and a need to see if there's anything left in Archie Sharp. They were really the plot lines in that Frank Warren card. So let's just fly through stuff. It's looking like the hype cycle around Tommy Fletcher is going to die down. You know, they'll talk about this guy's 6'7", he punches like Tommy Hearns. I genuinely believe a welterweight Tommy Hearns would have knocked that guy out that he was fighting on Saturday. And this is what happens when people talk stuff up. They always talk about, he's 6'7", he's this, he's that, he trains with Mark Tibbs. But I'm like, what does that really mean? What we ascribe things to trainers that don't make any sense. Like, whatever you want to say about Mark Tibbs' gym, it's not a factory of champions. That's a fact. It's not a factory of champions, right? It's a gym that he has the money to own. That's what's happened, right? And so he trains people because he has the financial resources to do so. Not unique by any stretch of the imagination. Same with Richard Sawyer. We'll talk about him in a sec. Once they've got money to do something, they do it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to succeed. I think as soon as Tommy Fletcher steps in with someone at cruiserweight who knows what they're doing, it's going to get very rough for him. And I don't know him as a person. He doesn't strike me as the most resilient of people. And my test is always this. Would I be nervous stood next to him if he was 5'8"? And the answer is no, I wouldn't. Yeah. And next time you're around a big guy, just work it out. Would you be nervous around this guy if he was 5'8"? Now, I'll tell you this now. You see Alois Jr., if he was 5'1", I'd still be nervous around him. Why? Because he's got the mindset. He will want to take your head off. And doesn't matter how big you are, he will try and do it. That's him. Yeah. You don't manufacture that. I feel the same about Isaac Chamberlain. If Isaac was smaller, he'd be just as intense. You'd be just as nervous around him. If Isaac was 6'10", it would be the same. God, that'd be scary. There are people you meet who are like that. They've got that warrior spirit. They've got that desire to want to do a lot of damage. I don't think Tommy Fletcher does. And I also don't think, he doesn't seem to just have that raw power or that whip that someone of his kind of frame should have. There's a lot where you're like, I don't think he's going to be amazing, but I don't think he's going to be terrible either. I'd like to see him. Let's start thinking about this at some point before the end of the year. Him versus Jordan Thompson. And let's just see what the levels are. Because we can't keep having all these careers being dragged out and we have to wait 15 fights to find out the guy was never going to make British level. We ain't got time for that. So let's just get all of this stuff sorted as quickly as possible. That's what Turkey should do. Just give us a shakedown of British boxing. But I wasn't impressed with Tommy Fletcher. I wasn't that impressed with Royston Barney Smith. I think we're into another Dennis McCann discussion here. Kids who look good in the amateurs and have all the technique in the world, but they don't have the physical constitution to do damage. They're just not tough enough. They have everything else. Royston Barney Smith has everything else. Ben Davidson's doing a great job in helping his technique and helping him tactically. He doesn't have the raw physicality to do the damage. He's not a Yusuf Kamari, a guy who you look at and go, I imagine Yusuf could do 100 fights and that body would hold up. He's not that sort of guy. So what do you do if you've got Royston Barney Smith, whack him in with Reece Bellotti or something like that? Let's just find out where everyone's at. Put him in with whoever. That level of guy, just put him in there. Let's just get to this kind of point of, are we investing or are we not? But he hasn't stopped anyone recently. And it's not like he's been given, pieces of granite to punch either. So it's a bit of a worry. But that doesn't mean I don't think he's talented. That doesn't mean I don't think he's good to watch. But I just think at the level he's at now, you got to be stopping people. If you've got aspirations to cause trouble at the top of the game, you got to be stopping these sorts of guys. Because Gervonta Davis would have done. Loma would have done. And if you want to operate at that level, that's what you got to do. So I was a bit disappointed by that one. Kind of on the fence with Ryan Garner. I like him. I like everything stylistically. I like, he takes a few risks with the low left hand and so forth. And you can see that there's skill there. My only question is, at what level will that skill start to break down? Could he do that against Archie Sharp? In fact, why don't we just find out? Yeah? Why doesn't Frank just make that fight? Archie Sharp versus Ryan Garner. Which of those two is going to get the privilege of being fed to one of the Mexicans? Which one of them? Which one of them is going to have to fight a Burchelt or an Oscar Valdez, or who's going to have to fight one of those guys? Who's going to have to fight Gary Russell Jr.? Let's just stop playing around. But I thought he boxed well. I thought Liam Dillon was Liam Dillon. You know, people talk about him, he's tough like a Mexican. It's like, yeah, but Mexicans can kind of box a bit as well. But look, for what Liam Dillon is, thought he was good. Thought he did what he had to do. And so he made the fight compelling and he gave Garner that test. But now you just got to kick Garner on because you don't know how long you've got him for. So you may as well make money now while the sun shines. Which brings us nicely onto Archie Sharp, right? So this is tricky because I know Archie's team and I knew Archie's previous team, which was iBox. And, you know, how many times are we going to hear about Archie Sharp beating Ted Cheeseman in the amateurs? How many times are we going to hear that story over and over again? This is what he did. That's all well and good. Archie Sharp's, there's something there. There's clearly a talent there. But I don't know what the missing piece is. Is it environmental? Is it psychological? What is it with Archie Sharp that means he doesn't get busy? You know, I watched the fight. I can't remember the lad he fought. Little stocky guy that he fought. And he got dropped twice in the first round. And we can talk about 8-ounce gloves and being caught cold and all that sort of stuff. And that's all true, by the way. But at no point in that fight did you get the impression that Archie could take him out. And this comes back to my point. At what level do you start to break down? At what level do your skills break down? At what level are you ineffective? Because if this is a level where Charlie Sharp becomes ineffective, and I just mean ineffective in terms of you don't have a deterrent, then it's going to be tricky. Because, well, you're going to box southpaw forever. Like no one's going to figure it out next time. You see what I mean? And if the other guy had been a bit more switched on, he'd have handled that as well. But credit to Ian Weaver. I thought Ian Weaver took control in that corner well. I thought he nursed Archie Sharp through that because they understood that they had to win. And Ian was like, well, let's just get the win. And people forget how good a boxer Ian Weaver was. There's a parallel universe where Ian Weaver won an Olympic gold medal. Sometimes you're just unlucky. But Ian Weaver, top guy, really good fighter, and did his job really well in that corner. I don't know if anyone else in that corner could have navigated it that way, but he saw the problem. He said, right, you got to switch to southpaw, man. No, you can't keep getting caught like that. And he used that just to buy himself a bit more time. And then Archie works his way back into that fight. But Archie's got that tough question to ask. It was the same question when he went to iBox. I said, how hungry is Archie Sharp to be great? And I don't know if he is. He hasn't shown it. And that's what he's got to show. And if I'm Frank Warren, if I'm Francis Warren, if I'm George Warren, I'm looking at Archie Sharp and I'm having an ominous conversation in the family. I'm saying, he hasn't shown us he's at that Cordina level. And at some point, he needs to show that in the next 12 months, or we need to move on from Archie Sharp. Keep matching him hard. Keep matching him hard, and let's find out how bad Archie Sharp really wants a world title shot. Because it's all very well trying to be the world Southeast super featherweight champion. I mean, world Southeast London super featherweight champion. That's cool. Like, you can be a local hero for a long time, but if you want that real money, you got to start chasing people who are really good at this thing, really consistent, and more importantly, really dedicated to it. So we're going to find out. I know people say there was stuff going on outside, but it's his life, man. Take control of your life. People need to stop making excuses that stuff is going on outside of their lives. These are your lives to control. I think sometimes in boxing, people want the glory of being a boxer with none of the sacrifices. So they don't want to compromise on their lifestyle and their identity. They still want to be Jack the Lad. And we saw this with guys like Billy Joe. We saw it with Frankie Gavin. They will still want to be Jack the Lad and be elite fighters. But you can't do both. You're going to be mediocre at both. It's like CrossFit. You're just going to be middle of the road at both of them. So we'll see what Archie does. Like, I'd like to see him have a good run. I don't know if too much bad water has gone under the bridge. But we'll see when it comes to that. Because, there's something there, but I can't put my finger on why it's not clicking. Right, should we talk about Cardiff? The the card that didn't really make much sense. Let's start with the main event. So Lauren Price beats Jessica McCaskill. McCaskill's eye looked an absolute mess. It looked like it came from a clash of heads. And is that the second time a clash of heads has stopped a Lauren Price fight? Referees need to get stronger on this. I don't believe you should be allowed to just steam in recklessly with your head, because then it becomes a weapon. And this is something that plagued Holyfield's career. And referees are too weak to really clamp down on what you can class as just reckless behavior. It's essentially foul play for me. Orthodox versus Southpaw. You already know what's going to happen when you just crash in with your head. Now, look, let me just start by saying I like Lauren Price. I think her style is, how do you put it? She boxes like she's scared to die. And that's the only way I can describe it. It's this insanely relentless approach of, I'll throw more punches and, I won't stop throwing punches. It's almost like a Calzaghe style. Not as clean as Calzaghe, but that same intensity and just desire to throw 1,000 punches is there. And it's good, by the way. I think, tactically it's good because it forces people to work at your pace, and most people can't. McCaskill struggled. McCaskill thought she could box her way into this. And Lauren Price said, no, you can't. With Price, you've just got to blast through her. You can't outbox her. You can't There's a woman that won an Olympic gold medal, for God's sake. You don't think everyone thought they could outbox her? You don't think the Kazakhs, the Russians, and all those were like, yeah, we can outbox her? The Indian team, yeah, we can outbox her. The Italians, she ain't even really a 75 kilo. We should be able to bully her. You don't think everyone thought they could do something to Lauren Price, and there she was winning gold? So who trains McCaskill? Is it Rick Ramos? Is it like her husband or something? Whatever it is, McCaskill's career has been exposed for just being incredibly hollow. I don't care what anyone says, it's hollow, because when it came time to show and prove, she's never shown and proved. Now, as for Lauren, how do you beat Lauren Price? I genuinely think you just march into her. You just think you march into her, start moving her around, start banging real heavy shots. And because she's not a defensive genius, she just dominates through owning the exchanges. So her, if you look at her versus Karis, Karis is looking to knock you out. Lauren Price will just drown you with work rate because she understands it's only 2 minutes. And I respect that, by the way. It's a good approach. And you can see, a lot of times, the demons come out in her and she goes. But that reckless movement with the head has to be addressed. And I'd say that about anyone when too many things are happening around cuts. I say the same about Liam Williams. Liam Williams is reckless with his head. Maybe it's a Welsh thing. Just reckless with their heads. Stick the nut on him butt. And all that sort of stuff. That was a terrible accent. But it doesn't matter. Now, I don't know what you do with Lauren Price now. Because at welterweight, that's kind of it. Sandy Ryan and Tasha Jonas. I don't think the Terry Harper fight will happen. So now what do you do? Do you go down? Do you go up? If you're Lauren Price, what do you do? Can you go down? That would be my question. But I'm still high on Lauren. I just don't like this. Where fights are getting ended because of cuts. I don't like that. Because if I was in the other corner, I'd be annoyed. I'd want it to be a fair contest. Because then what you're doing is you say, right, if you fight Lauren Price and you miss with this shot, just put your elbow in the middle. Yeah, just put your elbow in the middle. Let her rush into your elbow. And then you get called the dirty fighter, but all you're doing is protecting yourself. So something needs to happen about that. That would be my issue. And, for what it's worth, that's just my opinion. In terms of the rest of that card, I don't even know half the people. I do, but I don't watch half the people on there. Moses Jolly is just there to fill a card. Moses Jolly's 8-0, and apart from Phil Williams, you don't know who he's fought. Put Moses Jolly in with someone like Harry Armstrong. Stop effing around. I like Mickey Elliott, but you got to stop effing around. If you believe in Moses Jolly, put him in with a guy like that. If you believe in him, put him in with a Chris Healy. We just want to know how good he is. Put him in with Solly Dakers. Right? But there are fights you can put Moses Jolly in. I don't want to hear all of this learning your craft nonsense. Don't learn your craft in the pro circuit. Get the F out of here. Seriously, just get out of here. Yeah, that's what I'd say about that Moses Jolly one. Louis Edmondson. What are they doing with Louis Edmondson? Like, I don't want this thing of we're just going to fatten him up to feed to Ben Whittaker, like it seems they're doing with Jack Arnfield. Like, I didn't realize Jack Arnfield was back until today. Like 6 years out, and they've dug up Jack Arnfield and said, look, mate, go and have a couple of quick tune-ups, and then we'll put you in with someone, probably Ben Whittaker. Like, this is the bit of boxing I don't like. There are enough people available. Like, Ben should have been fighting Joel McIntyre. You gave Joel McIntyre to Louis Edmondson. That would have been a good win for Ben. I think it's a good win for Louis. Like, if Ben had stopped Joel McIntyre, that would have been good. Trying to think who else we need to touch on. No, let's stay on Louis. What do you do with Louis? Like, I think you can build Louis up. It's about, if he's serious about wanting to be successful, give this guy a chance, because he can box. It's just about whether he's dedicated to the lifestyle enough, but he can box. So why not give that guy an opportunity? Let's see what he can do, because light heavyweight is somewhere we can make fights in this country. You can build Louis up, throw him in with Shakan Pitters. You can look, if you're going to dig people up, Andre Sterling's available. Get Andre out. Andre versus Ben Whittaker, why not? These are the conversations that need to happen, guys. So let's talk about Huey Fury. I see a lot of people kind of poo-pooing his comeback and saying, you know, the guy's a mess. He ain't what he used to be. Let's just pause for a second and let's put this in context. Huey Fury is about the same age as Moses Jolly. Moses Jolly's had 8 fights. Huey Fury's had 32. Huey Fury's younger than Solomon Dakers. Solomon Dakers has had 8 fights. Huey Fury's had 32. Remember that. Huey Fury is younger than Solomon Dakers. Huey Fury's not 30 yet. He's had 32 fights. And these aren't fights where he's necessarily taken a beating, by the way. Like, he doesn't have those miles on the clock that you would have from 32 wars. So if there's still something in Huey, he's still competitive. But how soon do we let him loose at world level? And if Sky got the money to let him loose at world level, then if I get in trouble for saying this, sorry, Peter, but I am not paying pay-per-view to see Huey Fury based on what I've seen so far. As a heavyweight, if you're not knocking people out for fun, I'm not paying. It's as simple as that. I'll watch and I'll respect. I'm not paying. But I want to see Huey do well. It looks like he's been really unlucky with stuff. A couple of fights he's been really unlucky. But we want to see him back in that mix. Put him in with these guys like Efiag Jagba, Michael Hunter. Put him in with those guys, yeah, so we can gauge where he's at. And then I'm sure there'll be a start on Riyadh season for him. You could put him in with Justice Honey. You mean there are loads of these guys you could put him in with. Even if you want him at domestic level, let him have a little run out with like a Tommy Welsh or something like that. Let's see where he's at. But don't keep digging up these people we don't know, because the guy's 32 fights in. If he ain't ready now, he's not ready. You know, we'll give him a couple more, reasonable level fights. Even like a Dave Allen will give him that sort of level, and then you got to kick on. But I wish him all the best. I do. Frustrating to watch, but he is talented. And when you've got 32 fights in the game, like, you know what you're doing. You've proved that you can do this sport properly. So I wish him all the best. But let's just sort of top and toe that by saying that card could have been and should have been a lot better for Lauren Price. And I feel for her, because she deserved better. That's an Olympic gold medalist, and we should honor her accordingly. Side note, but completely unrelated. If you've seen the heavyweight rankings, Big Aussie's like, is he at 20th or 21st? Like, it's the most incredible career. So I'm actually gonna, now that me and Oz are cool, I'm actually gonna put him over here and say he wasn't getting the love and respect and, you know, enthusiasm he thought he deserved from British promoters, right? And so he said, right, I'm going to get on a plane, I'm going to go and get my fights. And so now he's like 6-0, I think it's 6 stoppages, and he's ranked above guys like Jamie Shakiva and those sorts of guys. Like, and this has all happened in like a year. He's gone from not making his debut to making his debut. I love this story. I don't know where it's going to end. I love the life out of this story, because if this does happen, if he ends up like being ranked, this will be the biggest middle finger a boxer has given the sport ever, because so many people doubted him, maybe even me, and he's proving us wrong by hustling, and I respect that. So good luck to Big Aussie. I wish him all the best, man. I think there's something in there. I genuinely think there's something in there. If the right trainer can just believe in him, invest in him, and love him. He needs to be loved. Here's a free coaching tip that I give people. Big heavyweights need to be loved. We see them and we see these big giants and we're like, oh my God, oh my God. But they're so used to that. They're not used to being seen as people with feelings and emotions, and they get a little weak too. They get nervous, they get intimidated. So sometimes they just need an arm around and say, listen, we're in this together. And Big Oz is one of those. He just needs to be loved. And once you do that and he trusts you, he'll do anything for you. Will he be challenging? Of course he will. You expect that, man. At the top level, everything should be challenging. But I wish him all the best. That would be an incredible story if he can turn that around. So yeah, Big Aussie, keep an eye on that. Like Big Aussie Omaregi. I'm buzzing about that because it's kind of come out of nowhere, but he's doing it his way, and he was always going to do that. So I say kudos to him and good luck to him. And we'll see how that story ends. I was going to fly through the Australia card real quick. I want to start with the one that's of most British interest, in Nina Hughes versus Shanique. What do they call it? Sugar Neeks. So is it Shanika Clark? I can't even remember her name now. I was just talking about it this morning. Now, there's nothing more farcical than the wrong winner being read out. I'm going to tell you why. Both of those women were in camp week after week, putting their bodies through the line. And I know Nina's situation a little better. So Nina's a mum and a wife. So she's parking family life to the side for a bit to focus on this. So when she gets told that she's won, in that instant, it made all the sacrifices worth it. There's no feeling like it, I imagine. Like, wow, I've done it. And I did it on hostile territory, right? So imagine you get drawn back. Oh, guys, we've got to do this again. We've got to announce the winner again. And you know that it's only going to go one way from that point, right? Only going to go one way at that point. And this is the bit where I feel for Nina Hughes. You're going to take someone who's thought they've won, and then you're going to go, look, come back. And she's got to now deal with that dread and that kind of acceptance that, they're going to rob me, right? Because that's how she feels. They're going to rob me. And so they announced it for Shanika Johnson. And all hell breaks loose, quite rightly, because now Nina's like, what the hell? And so I'd want to know, like, show me the scorecards. That's what I'd want to see. Show me the scorecards, because this can't be right. How do we get to such an error? Now, if you look at it in the context of the fight, I wouldn't be mad with Johnson winning. I don't think Nina Hughes imposed herself, and sometimes you have to understand the game. And so this is where your team and your manager are important. If Nina Hughes had rung me and said they've offered me a fight against Shanika Johnson in Australia, I'd have said they're trying to take the belt off you. They're trying to take the belt off you because you've kind of sat on that belt and not done anything with it. And they're looking at it going, we can do something with that belt. We can do a Shanika Johnson versus Ebony Bridges. I think they fought before, but we can do that again. And we can put the belt on Ebony Bridges. And we can make money with Ebony Bridges and that belt. We can't make money with you and that belt. If the belt's not making money, we've got to take it off you. This is how boxing works. That's why certain champions don't get a long life with that belt, because they don't draw money. I wish people understood this. So Nina Hughes went over there to hand the belt over. Yeah. And then they'll work out what to do with the young Australian lady and who she will then get to fight. Because that's really what you're looking for, right? So really break down. Let's peep the scene here. You've got Shanika Johnson, who loses to Ellie Scotney for the IBF at Super Bantam, right? And then that's matchroom. Then you've got Shanika Johnson, who could fight Ebony Bridges, who's also matchroom, right? So there's money here, and what was stopping that money was Nina Hughes, because Nina's not bringing the same kind of money. Like, there's too much overlap between Nina and Eddie Scotney, and there's zero overlap between Nina Hughes and Ebony Bridges. There's zero overlap between Nina Hughes and Shanika Johnson, but there's overlap between Shanika Johnson and Ebony Bridges, because there's a whole New Zealand Australia thing. There's the whole kind of just a natural kind of situation between those two, and there's more money in that. And so this is when boxing's a dirty game. Money gets taken into consideration when they decide who should hold the belt. And Nina wasn't in a position to do that. And I wish her management and her training team had warned her about that, and maybe she'd have fought differently, because she was too passive in that fight. She didn't understand that she had to win and win convincingly. So when she says she was robbed, I don't think she was, but I think what happened to her was an absolute disgrace. I think it's a disgrace to the sport. I think it's a disgrace to the organization of whatever Australia boxing is, and you wonder why these guys don't win many medals when you see that sort of shambles. But let's not rant and rave too much about that. Let's talk about how lucky George Kambosos was, man. Wow. We're banning Teofimo Lopez from fighting sick. We're banning Teofimo Lopez from fighting injured, because he created a monster in this George Kambosos. George Kambosos is a guy that probably isn't good enough to beat Lee Selby at 135 pounds, right? Lopez goes in there half-cooked, paid a heavy price for it, and has to live with that for the rest of his career. And that basically gave George Kambosos a multi-million-pound career that he was never going to have. He deserves it because he showed up and he did what he had to do. And I think that kind of came to a crashing halt against Vasyl Lomachenko. And it was good to see kind of, not necessarily the old Loma, but elements of the old Loma back. And that was pleasurable to watch. Now, what you do with Loma next, I don't know. Does he fight Tank? Does he fight Shakur? Put him in these big fights. And people need to stop swerving him, because he's earned the right to be in the mix now. That's what I would say. But we'll see, man. You know, when people tell me that Loma's the greatest of his generation, and I'm like, social media has made us so obsessed with hyperbole that Inoue is the greatest ever, Crawford's the greatest ever, Crawford will smash Mayweather, Inoue will beat Pacquiao, Loma beats everybody, all this sort of stuff you just hear, and I'm like, it's not how the game works, man. Loma's got 3 or 4 losses, and those aren't losses to like Hall of Famers, right? Those are losses to okay boxers, good in their generation boxers, not generational talent. So we need to stop with this Loma talk, this Loma all-time great talk, just like we need to stop with this Usyk all-time great talk. Neither of them is at that level. They never have been. I saw someone tweet not long ago, they said, do you know what? Alexander Usyk is the same size as George Foreman was at his peak. And he's like, yeah, Foreman was considered a big heavyweight. And I'm like, yeah, but Usyk's not the same size as Ron Lyle. That's for damn sure. But all this stuff, like, people find the most ridiculous reasons. And I guess this is the sin of being a boxing fan. Boxing fans are, if you took boxing fans as a broad church and said, right, percentage-wise, what percentage of boxers are what you just class as pussies, cowards, scared of their own shadow? I'd say about 70%. And that's what you see in Twitter. That's why you see a lot of effeminate behavior. You see a lot of submission, a lot of fear, a lot of insecurity. Just enjoy the fight while it happens. Now, I should do an episode on Fury Usyk, but just in light of what happened at Harrow Leisure Centre, I wasn't in the headspace to think about that, unfortunately. So I had to go in with what I'd prepared mentally. Like, I couldn't even write an outline of an episode out today. So I just had to go off the top. because like if, when boxing loses one of its soldiers, it should hurt us all because we understand what these guys put on the line, and it's said a bit too often that boxers put their lives on the line, but in many situations they do. Do we want to make this just about boxing and how dangerous it is? Hopefully not, man. I hope it just turns out to be a bad accident. Just when bad luck and someone's dreams collide. Just something like that. But prayers up for Sharif Dean Lawal, and I think that's a good place to end it.
Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com.